Welcome to the Adobe lesson on bolts and screw threads. In the HSC, questions often refer to bolts that will say an M20 times 2 or an M15 by 1.5 or an M30 by 2. What it means is M stands for metric, the next number 20 is the diameter of the bolt, and the number 2 is the pitch. Now when we come to draw that, we've got to work out that the head of the bolt is 1.8 times D, which is 1.8 times 20, which is 36. So we measure 36 millimeters and we mark it. Now how thick is the bolt head? Well, the bolt head is 0.7 D. So 0.7 is 14 millimeters. So we would measure down with our ruler 14 millimeters and we would have 14 in there. The next thing, often the question will say how long the bolt is. So if the examination says the bolt's 60 long, we know that from the underside of the bolt head to the end of the bolt will be 60 millimeters. But before we draw that, we're going to look at the diameter. Now the diameter is 20 millimeters, so obviously with our center line of the bolt, we'll measure 10 millimeters each side, we'll make a mark, and we will project that down. All the way down. We then get our rule, and we would measure that the bolt length is 60 millimeters, and we'd make a little mark and we transfer that across, so we've got our 60 mil bolt length and diameter all done. The next bit of the information, we've got a 2 millimeter pitch, and that means that on each side of the bolt we have a 1 millimeter thread. Sometimes it's in examinations they tell you how long that is, or they'll normally say a threaded length of 30 millimeters. So 1 millimeter each side, with a 45 degree, the 45 degree lines just indicate how we start the screw thread when we're cutting it. And then we rub out those little sections there. And we're left with how the bolt will look. The next thing, the head of the bolt. What we do is we need to divide that into 4 equal sections. So when we have a bolt head, like so, it has 6 sides. So we need to show, if we look on the side view there, we can actually see 3 faces. So if we measure 36 into 2 is 18, and we mark 9 off centre and 9 off centre. I've just drawn that a little bit inaccurate because that's 10 each side, so the 9 will be just on the inside of it. And there we have our bolt drawn in front view. Now that we've drawn the bolt, we're going to look at the nut. Now the nut thickness is 0.8 the diameter. So if the head's 14 millimeters, the nut will be 16 millimeters. Now, what are bolts mainly used for? They're used for clamping materials together. So if we draw in 2 materials that are going to be clamped together, like so, a bit of sheet steel, and we'll make that one a little bit thicker. The bolt's going to be used to clamp these 2 bits of materials together. Now, if we're going to do a half-sectional view, we will, remember we don't section bolts, nuts or washers. And we alternate the angle to show that they're 2 separate materials there. So that would be called a half-sectional view. Now, let's look at clamping these together. A washer is 2 times the diameter of the bolt, and our bolt is 20, so therefore our washer is going to be 40. We draw him all the way through, he's slightly larger than the bolt head. Our nut thickness is 0.8, so it's going to be, as we said, 16 millimeters, so it's slightly thicker than the head of the bolt. We make sure they all line up. And there we have it. Now that's a half-sectional view of the 2 sheets. When we do a full sectional view, we would continue this through. So these bits of metal on this side are shown as well. Now this time, we don't show the sectional views in here. So we've got the blue line of the washer. So we rub out those particular parts of the thread because it's in the nut and the washer, which is not shown. Now continuing on for bolts and threads, another way that can be often shown or asked in an examination for special or custom bolts is that we can have different size heads. Now sometimes they will say a bolt has a head AF, which equals across the flats, and if we look at this bolt head up here, If we go from this flat area to this flat face, a distance across is called across the flats. And we might say that this particular AF equals 40 millimetres. Now how we draw that? We put our centre lines in, because we're drawing the top view of the bolt head here. We've got our centre lines. Across the flats is 40 millimetres. So we would go up 20 millimetres, draw our surface, and go down 20 millimetres and draw our surface. We then need to get a compass and set it to the 20 millimetres and draw our circling. It's pretty close. Now, to complete that, we need to use our set square, our 60-30, and we need to draw at a tangent to the circle, to the centre line, down, flip our set square over, do the same on the other side, flip it back over again, making sure mine's not quite circular. Now, if you draw accurately, these will join up onto the centre lines, and that will give us the head of our bolt. Now that we've drawn our across the flat 40 nut or bolt head, whatever it may be, but usually it'll be the nut, we can now use our set square to project that down to draw the front view. Just quickly I'll draw those down. The head, if we're going to draw the nut, it'll be 0.8 the thickness or the diameter, and it was M20 by 2, so it's going to be 16 millimeters, as we've just drawn over on this other one before. So it's still 16 millimeters. Now that we've drawn our across the flats 40 millimeter nut, and we've got a front view projected down there to show the flats. If the nut is to be threaded, which they normally are, we would have to, if it's an M20 by 2, that means we would need to drill an 18 millimeter hole, which is radius 9, all the way through like so, and then we would have to cut a 20 millimeter 3/4, which is shown by going just past the 3/4 section, which is the thread, to show that a manufacturer that is a nut with a threaded hole cut through it. Now you can see we have a nut and bolt and washer set up. Notice that the 0.7 for the head, the thickness of the diameter, 0.8 for the nut, and it's slightly thicker than the head. And the washer, if we turn this around, we can see that the washer is slightly larger than the bolt head, which is 2 times the diameter. The length of thread on the bolt will be given to you, or it's sometimes mentioned when it says M20 times 2 times 50 for this one. So 50 millimeters from the underside of the head to the end of the screw thread.